Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. In today's episode, I first want to start off by saying this, and I just got off the phone with Joseph Beth. I hung up because it was way too long of a wait time. I quite frankly did not want to be bothered, and in part, this is kind of why I see why AI is kind of stepping in, and we do things online, and we just kind of negate the middleman because we are all spoiled by convenience. But anyway, I'm looking for a book, and I want to start learning more about the Latino community. I'm at a place in my life where, I've noticed this a while ago, but I have such grievance for American education because instead of being able to learn about other cultures, I have to spend so much of my time pedaling backwards to learn about my own culture and my own community because I was deprived of those things. I was deprived of learning about those things within the continuous span, right, of over 12 years within American institutionalized learning. So it's really unfortunate. And then you also have to take into consideration all the lies that we're also told about ourselves and our communities and the persistent bullying and antagonization on the Black community to destroy the Black family. And that is what we're going to be talking about in today's video. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about why I think relationships are struggling today. And I think I more so want to kind of start this off by talking about what is it that makes a person attractive, right? Because as much as we like to feel as though we are individualized, I think it is something you truly have to fight for every single day. I think it is something that you have to be so intentional about because otherwise you will find yourself just being adapted or, taking on so many thoughts that aren't yours, And this is really unfortunate because it's hard to kind of go against that, right? As much as I read books and I try to just stick with that and, reading articles from, credited sources and things like that, I know for a fact that I've been impacted by influence, right? By the social influence. I know I've been impacted in some of my ideas and things like that. And it sucks because it happens so quickly, right? I talk about American history as the subtlety of corrosion. Corrosion. I can never say I can say coerced, like coerced. It's the ER I think I'm missing. And it could just be I think it's just the way, the pronunciation of how, I don't have a list, but it's I don't know. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. I can spell it. But that's American history. American history is the subtlety of corrosion, corrosion. Yes, that is American history. And so, it's just unfortunate because as much as you like to think you're not impacted by certain things, you are. And I was just talking about how we were at this place now where we were completely, we were signing over our right to privacy, right? We hear these things and, people try to come out and talk about it. You have investigative journalists, all these different things. But it's we were at a point now where, so here's the thing about American society. Something is then introduced to us, to the general public, large span, right? And we're absolutely not. Absolutely not. That is not okay. But with continual repetition, we actually start to conform and we say, well, this is okay, right? For example, let's talk about the very general common critique, which is clothing today, modern day clothing, right? Seeing a guy in something that you wouldn't really constitute as masculine or whatever the case may be, you would be no. We were no, we don't want this. But then it was okay, well, here we are, right? Same thing with women, seeing women in overtly sexual clothing. It was no, this is too much. We don't want this, but here it is and it's okay, right? And it's funny too, with both really, because the thing about social media and likes and things like that is I genuinely think that we are outside of the idea and the mind frame that, people are just buying likes, right? We are very much aware that in large, we talk about content creators and celebrities and people who really do have large audiences, they're pretty authentic. So when you go online and you see that this post has hundreds and thousands, if not millions of likes, then it's very clear, right? That's a very clear indicator that this is now socially acceptable. So I wanted to talk about what constitutes as attractive, right? I remember growing up, right? And I'm not saying growing up as in a young girl. I mean, quite literally getting older. And I was I like the way I look. I think I'm gonna just kind of revert back, right? I was a young girl. I was experimenting with makeup, doing all the normal things that young women do, right? And as I got older, I just started to just really love myself, and not to say that people who don't, whatever, but I just was like, okay, this is just me. This is me. This is what it is, And so I found myself shifting and changing in that way. But I was met with a completely different reaction from my peers, right? I honestly felt like I was so unattractive. And not just because of the lack of male attention or male validation or whatever the case may be, but because of how I felt like I was treated by my peers and the very obvious like social response to me no longer fitting into a certain type of aesthetic, right? And what was also very evident to me as well is that when I started to look at my life, as I started to live in this truth, and it did not align with modern day aesthetics, and especially Black girl aesthetics, which really does have an emphasis on hypersexuality, I was literally like a castaway. I felt so isolated. I felt like I started to go inward on the social rejection that I felt like I was experiencing by my peers. And this is also what I think a lot of people are going through. And I think it's so important that we have this conversation. And I'm glad to be talking about it, because a lot of people don't know how to articulate this. And I didn't know how to articulate it either until fast forward, looking back, hindsight. And I'm like, oh, that's what that was, right? And so when we start talking about the ways in which our brains are programmed to consider something acceptable and not acceptable, this was really bad. This was breaching on our authenticity. And I think this is exactly why relationships are failing. It's this rise that you have of like nihilism, hedonistic society. Everyone's so individual, you know what I mean? Individualized, and everyone's so focused on themselves or whatever. And it's like, okay, yes, it started off as a great thing. And it was like, this could still be a great thing, because my first initial thoughts was like, well, I'm glad we're moving in this place in society, because people are gonna find themselves. They're gonna be authentic. They're gonna start to, mate with people who are more in aligned with who they are. But no. What it was it made people so devoid of themselves that they were willing to do anything to kind of just fit into a certain type of aesthetic. And when you think about just social response, like your social responses when you're in certain places, how people treat you. And we heard this on TikTok. A lot of women, especially today, have kind of adopted this belief that the more prettier you are, the better you look, the more you look like you could, I don't know, buy everybody up in the club, something like whatever the case may be, right? The better chances you have at getting respect or being seen or being heard. Like, you know what I mean? And obviously not seen in terms of like aesthetically, but like, internally. And so what we were struggling with in terms of our relationships, not just romantic, but I also think just even our platonic relationships, was people was really struggling to connect with other people, because people went about their connections in a completely different way. The ways in which we go about connection today is more manufactured, right? It's no longer about connecting with a person from a human standpoint, which is crazy, because when you start talking about our rights as humans, we're kind of like animals at this point in modern day society, right? Capitalism completely, it's like we're no different than the animals in the zoo. And I know that sounds like such a bold thing to say, but like, just hear me out. Let's just think about it, right? It's like, instead of going about our connections in a way that was genuine and authentic, and we felt good about the people we were connecting with, because it was like, oh, this resonates with my soul, this resonates with my spirit, I like this person, we're connecting. Now we were going about it in a more so mechanical kind of like way. We were seeking to manufacture these relationships by using external baiters and external aesthetics and things like that to really essentially flag people down. And it's no wonder, of course, when you do that, our relationships are now superficial, and it's become so normalized that we say things like, well, yeah, marriage is transactional and marriage is a business contract, right? And if you hear that stuff long enough, you're going to get into friendships and you're going to be around people, and you are going to start to ask, what is in it? What have you done for me lately, right? What is in this for me, right? It's going to be really hard for you to partner and to be in mutual relationships when you can't see a person beyond what they can do for you, right? So this is what happens when humans are objectified. This is what happens when humans become the commodification, right? This is the thing. Now you're the commodity. Now you're the thing that we're serving up, right? And so it's so crazy, because again, going back to my whole premise of the subtlety of corrosion with American society. Right? They introduce a new thing and they make us think that this is going to be the thing. Like this is the thing that's going to answer your questions. This is going to be the thing. And it's like, it ultimately ends up being the thing that literally destroys us. And we were only progressing. And there was really no way to reel people back in, right? I was just thinking about how I was at dinner last night with my mom, and there were these younger kids there. And these kids all dressed to the nines. I mean, I'm not kidding. There were no scuffs on these kids' sneakers. And when I say kids, they had to be, 13, maybe less than 13, younger than 13. But no scuffs on the sneakers. Everybody's in fear of God. I'm seeing essentials. I'm seeing designer. I'm like, whoa, right? And it's just like, it's so crazy to me, because when you're a young child, the last thing you really want to be, influenced by or even coerced into, right, is materialism, because it's this never ending thing. And materialism can actually be a huge detriment to a lot of people's lives, right? I mean, think about the debt. Right? Think about that prioritization over responsibilities. Think about that prioritization, which has been continual in the Black community, unfortunately, over education and knowledge, right? And so now we're at this place where there was no debunking this, right? So what do? How do we get people to kind of come out of this and be like, hey, listen, let's just evaluate some things, right? We can have these conversations and it can be fun and dandy for the day, but then people are going to go on and live their lives, and they're going to be on social media, and it's like, without having really like your head on a swivel, you know what I mean? And really being like so vigilant and so alert of certain things. And if you see something more than a few times, you're going to think that this is normal, right? This is what becomes normal. And so even in our relationships, right, we don't know what's normal in terms of a person's limitations, a person's abilities, right? We no longer even have the ability to assess a person correctly, right? And I know a lot of times when people are like, well, vetting, or I've heard people say things like, a person's childhood trauma, which, let's talk about that as well, right? We start talking about attraction. Where do we draw the line and say, hey, listen, I'm actually not going to talk about childhood trauma, right? And it's not because it's something that I'm keeping a secret, right? But what happened to personal boundaries, right? What happened to being someone who is showing up? This is what it is, these are conversations that we have later on down the road. You know what I mean? A few years into the marriage, right? What is it that makes us, you see what I'm saying? And I say, what is it? But this is the byproduct of self-help culture, right? This is the byproduct of selling you an idea of how to manufacture relationships. And that manufacturing comes with this idea that you need to tell a person all these very evasive and really inappropriate things about you in order to have a relationship with them, right? It's no longer a matter of, hey, we're hanging out, I like this person, I can trust my feelings, right? No, it's, you're being love bombed. You see what I'm saying? So when you have all of that, the whole system starts to go haywire. There's messages and signals coming from every which way, and it's going to be really hard to sustain a relationship that way. And that's continuous, right? And so I think the detriment and the reason why we don't have we don't have relationships anymore, and relationships are struggling, marriages are stuck, because nobody's authentic. And I think it's really hard to be that way, quite frankly. I feel as though, for myself, I grew up with a very unique background, right? I was bullied. So that really led me to a lot of isolation. And then I got older, I was still kind of bullied by women and girls and things like that. And I felt as though I could never live up to the expectations, right? I wouldn't sign with this, but apparently I fit into some type of aesthetic, right? And it would be this thing to where people would attach me with certain things. And though at the time, and even, at times, sure, it could be ego stroking. It can be nice to be told that you look like a model. It could be nice to be told these things, but I had always felt so detached from that expectation. I always felt so attached from that aesthetic. I never felt like I could fit that aesthetic. I never felt like I could just be this, like, whatever they thought I could be, So I really struggled with that. And for a long time, I remember asking the question, oh my God, to be pretty or to be smart? Like, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? Because I would date the guys who would like me for the aesthetic that I would fit. I mean, I was slim. I fit into all these different aesthetics with a little bit of weave, a little bit of makeup. It just was a whole, it was the aesthetic. It was the standard aesthetic. And I was grateful for my beauty, but it was a thing that I felt so detached from, because growing up, I was bullied. I thought I was ugly. I was kind of skinny. I was slinky, all these different things. And so for me, it led me to develop a very rich inner world. It led me to be very humble. sometimes to a fault. But it led me to develop a very rich inner world, and it led me to really develop a strong sense of self because I avoided a lot of pitfalls in terms of peer pressure. I only thing I knew was how to be myself. You know what I mean? I didn't know how to be anything else. I didn't have that opportunity, right? I wasn't fitting into, the girls who were like super sexy because I didn't feel comfortable wearing certain things, right? I felt like I was thin. I wouldn't say that I struggle with body dysmorphia. I don't think I would actually go to label myself with anything or self-proclaim anything over my life, but I do feel as though I did struggle with how I looked. So I never felt like, so if some people say there was confidence in their bodies, I think for me, I was also raised in a generation that I'll say was very aware of pedophilia. It was definitely a thing to where we were taught that in school. We were taught that as young girls and so forth. So I just felt like I just came from that was my background. Okay. So, I just felt different. I grew up in a more conservative state. There was men in my family. I lived with brothers. It wasn't me. And I think even still to this day, it's like, okay, yeah, but not too much, but that's just not me, but for a long time I had to justify that. So I never felt like I could meet this Barbie-like representation of whatever people thought it would be. Once I reached 25, I started to notice how the wigs and the weaves and just anything that I liked for myself per se was putting me in this box to be assigned with like others. And I didn't like that because I'm like, hold up. That's one thing about it. I'm an individual. You know what I mean? You're not going to be able to box me in and think that I'm like these other girls or whatever. You know what I mean? Because that's just the one thing that I'm so fiercely protective of because I've worked so hard to develop a strong sense of self. Of course, by the grace of God, and of course, circumstances outside of my control and, parents and things like that. But at the end of the day, this is me. Nobody forced me to stick with writing, right? I could have easily been like, hey, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to model. I'm going to whatever, but it was like, no, I was too opinionated to be a model. I have opinions. I have thoughts. And I never felt like I was raised to be silent. I was always very vocal. And I cared about things. I wasn't superficial, even though I looked like I could have been, so it was that was a really troubling thing. And I think for any other woman who has ever kind of been in that space and who've had those experiences is very weird. I think a lot of women actually succumb to that because there's a lot of rewards over there. There's a lot of rewards for being this idealized woman. There's a lot of rewards for being the woman on the pedestal, right? The woman who people fantasize about, right? If you can play into those fantasies, you've got things at your fingertips, right? Like if you can play into, but it's funny because you see this with modern day rappers, right? At least in the beginning, they don't really vocalize it anymore. But there's always these narratives of like, well, hey, listen, wait a minute. I'm not just overtly sexual. I mean, I also like anime. Well, no, I'm a mother. Well, no, you know what I mean? And I think for me, I never wanted to play into those fantasies and to be put on that pedestal because I knew that there was more to me. There was so much more. I was way more complex than just an aesthetic, right? But today, women believe that this is the ticket, right? And this is why I always say too, in part, yes, we can assess a person's childhood, but just even in your own life, right? I think for a lot of women who have maybe felt deprived, which I just want to clear the air. If you are someone who's never really had a lot of guys, you should consider yourself blessed. No, seriously, you should consider yourself blessed. There's really something that's so heinous in the byproduct of just over like too much male validation. It can really alter you. It can really alter you. I grew up with girls like that, and I hate seeing young girls that way today. When I'm working in schools or whatever, I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I hate seeing them be just so boy crazy and guys being all over them because it's a terrible outcome. Let's just say that it's not at all what you think it's going to be. So anyway, yeah, so I loved who I was. Okay. And so fast forward, that can be really challenging when you meet people who don't feel that way and they have no idea how to get there, right? When again, for me, I just think it's a blessing. It was a very peculiar experience. Like I said, I grew up bullied. I grew up isolated. I didn't have friends. Nobody wanted to be my friend. you know, I would spend time with my cousins and things like that, but they would bully me too, So my haven was academia. That was the place where I was rewarded. And when I started reading, first it was Junie B. Jones, and it was all these other little cool books and things like that, just literary, those things became my haven. I felt like, I think I had anxiety growing up. I definitely think I had anxiety as a young girl. I was definitely probably undiagnosed. But unfortunately, I think a lot of Black kids do experience a lot of anxiety. But yeah, so books were the thing that just kind of took me away from that, right? There was a groove that I could get in when I was writing a paper, when I was, and I think that feeling and just knowing things. I saw at an early age how knowing things could just take you several steps ahead. And I don't know why I felt like I needed to be several steps ahead. I don't know why I felt the need to know so many things. It could be parentification, I think, in part. It could be survival. It could be mere interest, something as innocent as just, genuinely curious. I've looked into things like giftedness for adults and stuff like that. But anyway, so enough about me. I just want to end this by saying, yeah. And so when you have aesthetics and that's how you base your relationships, it's really hard, right? And this is, I should have opened this up with scripture because, I love that verse where it says God looks at the heart. You have Christians today who will really berate you if your sin is out in the open. Like, girl, you say a cuss word, it's like, oh, but inside, she's jealous of you. She's wicked. She's over here putting laxative in your green beans. Like, you know what I mean? But it's just like, because the aesthetic of a person is so good, right? That's what we fall for. And I don't think that that's just like modern, or I don't want to say modern, but I don't just think that that's just the fallacies of the human condition and superficialities being fostered. No, I genuinely think that we're at a place in society today where this is now the standard. This is exactly how you judge people and how you, consider them. And so I'm genuinely concerned about a lot of people who don't fit aesthetics. People who don't want to fit aesthetics, right? These have always been my people, but I think because of the mistreatment of them, sometimes people don't know how to receive that. And they look at you like a threat or a target or someone that they can beat up on because it's like, oh, who you think you are going to come? You know what I mean? So it gets very messy and it gets very complex. But yeah, we have to really ask ourselves, like, what is it that makes a person attractive? Because we can say all these very general sound good things. Oh, they're kind. No, it's not that. I can't tell you how many people I've met who've discarded me because I wasn't rich, because I was very fashionable and I was very creative. I grew up with a fashion background as well, and so it was just something I got good at. As I was in high school, I used to thrift a lot, get my clothes from the thrift store. That was before when thrifting was even a thing. This is when t-shirts was 50 cents, okay? Because this is crazy, right? 175, hello. But I would thrift. It was just a creative thing to do. And so I just got really good at fashion. I got really good at it. I mean, I have a familial background, ancestry there going on with the fashion thing. But, I personally, and this is probably going to be very bold of me to say, but I think most Black people, not all, but most Black people are pretty stylish, pretty sharp, as they would say back in the day, But anyway, yeah, so that was my thing. And so, I lost my train of thought, but I'm just going to conclude by saying that, you have to really ask yourself, what is it that makes someone attractive? It's easy to be like, oh, yeah, this person is just, they're this, they're that. No, right? And this is also a huge detriment, especially when you start talking about men, because men are, something I want to say, because I'm going to say what I'm going to say, but I'm also going to say this. Something that does make me, there brings a great sense of empathy for me when it comes to men is all the ways in which society really puts men in a pigeonhole, and it works overtime to keep them there by the justification, the excuses, the coddling, right? And what I was going to say was, men are conditioned, and it's socially acceptable and even commendable for men to date beautiful women. And it's like, no, men are just visual. Right? Instead of it being like, well, you shouldn't be so superficial. You know what I mean? And it's like, we wonder why so many men struggle with like arrested development. And it's like, yeah, because you never really grow up. You don't have to. Every facet, every corner of society, every crevice in society is going to commend you, and it's going to massage you, and it's going to validate you. Like, I was listening to a woman, and this is with the rise of the red pill movement, and she's going on and on about black women and their issues and why we don't have men. And I'm just looking at her like, the call is coming from inside the house. You are a black woman. Like, and we're just at this point now where I just think that men have such free reign. It's to their detriment, quite frankly. Use a little bit of restriction in your life. Have a little bit, dial it back. Have a little restriction. Okay, so, because you're never going to grow as a person. And then we wonder why, again, the decentering men movement, the video that I made, which really could have been a part 2, but we wonder why women are like, I can't deal with this incompetence, right? It's a shame. Men need new standards, not just of manhood, because I don't even think women are all aspiring to have the same ideals of womanhood, but it's just more so like for yourself. Set new standards for yourself. Who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? Because society is going to be your detriment. It's going to be your downfall. It's going to encourage you in every bad thing that will quite literally ruin and is currently destroying your life. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's absolutely no way. It's no way men shouldn't be able to articulate themselves and be intelligent and smart and all these really cool things. Like, it's no way that you shouldn't be into things other than physicalities. There's just no way. You think about how the reduction, how minimal that is to your life, to your full capability, to your whole life. You can't tell me that men are that robotic and remedial. I refuse to believe it. I refuse to believe it. So anyway, I'm going to go eat me some lunch. I think it's important to really assess what is it that makes a person attractive to you, and be real with yourself, because again, like I said, we talk about these very fluffy characteristics, but kindness is taken for weakness, first and foremost. And I actually want to say this too. I'll share from my own personal experience. Never being cynical. I think social media and content creation can be a means to vent some of the things that we've gone through. So let's not take any, certain generalizations as the truth, But I will say from my own personal experience, oftentimes as a black woman who is kind, you have no choice but to really up the ante, right? People see you as someone that they need to control, push over, or someone they can get over, right? I always talk about these dynamics, and I love to consider things like classism. Although there was a point in time where as black people, we were united regardless of class and educational level, or economic status. But at the same time, I just feel like, you're like a little fish down here with sharks when everybody's trying to survive. And that kindness is almost always taken as a weakness. And it's really unfortunate, because I think that this is what is the byproduct of the women that we create, right? Because I don't think that women are made this way, right? Quote unquote masculine, if we were to really heed to any of the red pill rhetoric, right? This is the byproduct of that, right? You don't really have a choice as a black woman, because that you will partner with men, and I've been in these spaces, and it's like they want to make you strong. They want to see you tussle and to see you angry, and to like it's like that's what they want. And it could be, again, going back to the whole premise of this video, because of how they've been conditioned to see black women, right? Difficult, aggressive, all these different things. And when you don't fit that, it's like, okay, what button do I press to get this outcome? Because I don't know what to deal with this. I don't know how to deal with this. This is weird, right? Only white women can have this. Only other women can have this, right? These characteristics that we claim to love, such as kindness, right? No, not a black woman. So let me push the button to activate this difficulty, right? But no, seriously, seriously. And so as a black woman, you're oftentimes not seen as something to be protected. You have to be something to be feared, You have to be something too. Like, you have to bring about that. And we like to say things like, oh, don't be a doormat. Well, it's not a matter of being a doormat. You can stick up for yourself without being aggressive, but that's not enough, right? And you can say, well, you're dealing with childish men, you're dealing with boys. Okay, that's fine. You could say that's fine. But the fact is the vast majority. And so what happens is, once a woman reaches, I say, in her 30s, it's like, yeah, I've had enough of being taken advantage of. I've had enough of being the soft, the sweet, the kind person that I am. I've had enough of being that version of a woman. So now I have to bring on the fury, because otherwise, you know what I mean? I'm going to have hell to pay, you know? So yeah, that's something to think about. That's something to think about. I think that that last piece actually needs to be something that you guys really sit with, because if you're a Black woman, comment in the comments below and let me know if you've ever had an experience where, or multiple experiences where you've dated men who quite literally want to bring out the absolute worst in you, and who literally want you to be this little pit bull when you were a Yorkie Terrier.